Not every fantasy book with romance is romantasy, and here's how you can tell the difference. This is part 2 of my romantasy discussion. Last video, I discussed the difference between romantasy and fantasy with romance, and today we're going to be using actual book examples. Before we get started, however, I have to say a disclaimer. These books are not my recommendations. These books are not the best books ever written or books that I think that are the best in their category. They're simply popular books that I know everyone will know about, whether you love them or hate them. So again, true romantasy is when the romance is the engine of the story. My first example is Throne of the Fallen. Envy and Camilla, the two main characters, depend on each other to navigate this grand quest. Their emotional connection directly drives all the decisions that they make moving forward throughout the story. They cannot continue with this quest, they cannot finish the quest without one another. Same with From Blood and Ash. Poppy and Castiel's relationship highly influences every major point of the story. Every revelation, alliance, and every turning point of the story highly depends on their feelings for one another. Or The Serpent and the Wings of Night. Orion Rain's growing connection becomes deeply connected to survival, trust, and the direction of the narrative itself. The romance doesn't just support the plot, it creates the plot. Now compare that to fantasy with romance. The Cruel Prince. Jude and Cardin's relationship adds tension and complexity, but Jude's ambition, political goals, and fight for power exist independent of Cardin. With The Knight and the Moth, the romance develops, but the larger mystery and world building remain the main focus of the story. Both main characters have their goals of what they need to do throughout the story, and even though they fall for each other, it doesn't take away their main goals throughout. In Ember in the Ashes, Laia and Elias care deeply for each other, but survival, rebellion, and resisting the Empire continue to drive the story forward, regardless of the romance. Take out the romance, and the story, the plot completely remains the same. Honestly, there's so much happening in that one, I don't get why people call it a romantasy, but okay. Overall, in fantasy with romance subplots, the romance does matter deeply to the characters, but remove it and the core story still functions, the plot still continues. That's the distinction between the two, between romantasy and fantasy with romance. And remember, when men write fantasy with romance subplots, the marketing industry, the publishing companies, they simply market it as epic fantasy, no mention of the romances at all. But if a woman's name was on the cover, the book would immediately be labeled as romantasy, regardless of how much plot and fantastical elements is in there. Even when there's barely any romance, it's still categorized as romantasy because it's written by a woman. But I will not touch on that topic today. Fantasy with romance exists, romantasy exists, but they are two completely different things and different reading experiences. And honestly, I think social media blurs that line way too often.